When I was in college, I came up with three cardinal rules for my life. The first was don't let your emotions overpower your intelligence. The second was don't let the way other people treat you determine the way you treat them. And the third one is the one I want to get into today, which is don't compare yourself to other people. Many of us have heard the great quote that comparison is the thief of all joy. And I know that we struggle with this in our modern world. It used to be that you could just live in a small town. Most people lived in a small town or a village, and you would at most interact with a few thousand people in your life. You were being compared to maybe your peers at the local school or your peers at your local trade or your job or just the people in your age demographic and age bracket that were in your local area, but you didn't have social media, a international and kind of just even a national world in which we see so many different people. We can compare ourselves to so many people who are in the same status and age range and kind of stage of life that we're currently in. And so it's much more devastating to our emotional health, our mental health nowadays, even our spiritual health, really, to be constantly comparing ourselves to all of these different people that have all so many different metrics and so many different hidden things that we can't actually see in our kind of highlight reel social media world, that it's so devastating and discouraging to just constantly be comparing yourself to other people. And I've actually grown a lot in this. And one thing that's been really helpful is Jordan Peterson. And I want to take a look at a clip from Jordan Peterson today talking about this very topic. And then I want to share from another book called The Gap and the Gain to talk about another perspective on this of what can we actually compare ourselves to that's going to be helpful, that's going to build our confidence, that's going to boost our self-image, if it should be boosted, not artificially boosted, but actually give us more confidence and self-respect if we have earned it and deserve it, rather than just kind of either comparing ourselves to other people and experiencing discouragement or apathy that comes from that. Or the other side of it, I think, which is to not compare ourselves to anything and just be boosted with this kind of fake self-esteem that is really not founded on anything in reality at all. So I'm excited to dive into all this, dive into how you can build your confidence, how you can, in a healthy manner, compare yourself to some sort of standard or benchmark that allows you to see your progress without facing the discouragement and apathy that comes from endlessly comparing yourselves to others that you find on social media or even people that you know in real life. If you like this video, you get value out of this, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more great content. Without further ado, let's get to today's episode. All right, so as I mentioned, I wanted to begin with a clip from a Jordan Peterson interview on the Rubin Report with Dave Rubin. So this comes from Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life book. And so this is the 12 Rules for Life, an antidote to chaos. And he has this great rule. I believe it's rule number 4 in here. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. And this chapter was really impactful for me and really helped me to have a lot more clarity in this approach, this rule that I told you I made for my life when I was 18, 19 years old, to not compare myself to other people because I was starting to experience the negative emotions and just the downsides to constantly comparing myself to other people who were coming from better households than me, better families than me, who were smarter than me, who were more spiritually progressed than me, all these other things that made me feel a lot worse about myself than I really needed to. Even though I was making progress, I was growing closer to God, I was getting in better shape, I was getting better grades than I did in high school. And so when I compared myself in all these ways, in toxic ways, in saying, oh, I should be there, but I'm only here, it was really devastating for me and was really hampering and hindering my progress and growth along this journey. So let's take a look real quick at what Jordan Peterson has to say about this.
Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today.
Yeah, well, you got to improve, right? And so, and you might think, well, I'm a real fixer-upper and I'm really embarrassed about that because there's 50 things wrong with me and like, look at that guy. And so now I feel all terrible because of the comparison and all of that. And first of all, it's unfair because especially by the time you're about 30. When you're 17, you're like every other 17-year-old. And so that kind of social comparison is more appropriate. By the time you're about 30, your life has become quite idiosyncratic, you know, like let's say your life has 8 dimensions: family, friends, intimate relationships, health, you know, you can kind of lay them out. You're individually positioned in all those dimensions. Your life isn't like anyone else's life. And so you see someone who's doing better than you, it's like you're only seeing one dimension at one slice of time. So it's not reasonable. You know what? You don't have the whole picture. So, and then you get down on yourself and take the spirit out of yourself, and you get bitter and resentful. It's like that. There's nothing good about that.
Yeah.
So, but you do need to improve, because there's more to you than, there's not as much of you as there should be. So what's the comparison? Well, that's easy. You just say, okay, well, here's my position in time and space right now. Here's my virtues and faults. It's like, I can be a little bit better tomorrow in some minor way. Well, that's the right comparison, because you are very much like you. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Everything's the same about you.
Yeah.
And so it's the perfect comparison. And then you get a trajectory going. It's like, well, obviously I'm not perfect, but I'm slightly less terrible than I was yesterday. Man, you keep that up for 5 years and you're wherever you should be. That isn't where someone else should be, right? Because you really are an individual.
One of the things that strikes me about this, which also hit me in this chapter of the book, is the fact that it is unfair to compare yourself to other people. Again, you can go too far in either direction for this. And so growing up in a broken home, I became the first Catholic in my family at 13 years old. I had a rough male role model in my life from my dad. And I could compare myself to other people who were raised in great families, who had financial advantages that my family wasn't able to provide. But I also could do the other side of it. And I could start to feel bad about myself, comparing myself to people who had better advantages than me. But then I also can compare myself to people that I had advantages over and start to feel better about myself, have this inflated self-esteem that, again, I shouldn't really have. I haven't actually deserved or earned, because I'm comparing myself to people who were much worse off than me from the start. But because I am ahead of them in certain measurable categories and statistics, I can say, oh, look at me, look how great I am, because I'm better than this person. I'm further ahead than them. This is what I really started to develop this when I was in college, to say, I think that even in the spiritual life, started to say, I think that the real value comes from seeing how long you've progressed along your journey. I have friends who have converted to the Catholic faith who literally have family members who are doing witchcraft and doing all kinds of truly evil things and participating in evil, cooperating with evil. That is not good. That's really difficult to come out of. I have other friends in the Catholic faith who were raised by parents who are borderline saints, really faithful, holy people, have a good holy marriage, and they've grown up to reject the faith. And so you could look even in people who were raised by saints, raised by great people who grow up to be, moderately lukewarm Catholics. That might look better than somebody who was raised by family doing witchcraft and is now sometimes going to church, but not always, but they got baptized or whatever. That person who might have been raised in witchcraft may have come a lot further in their journey. They've covered more ground and distance getting to full-blown sainthood, full-blown communion with God, than the person who was raised in the faith truly, that has now actually regressed and gone backwards from the family, the life, the standard that they were cultivated and raised in. And so that's where it's never good to compare yourself to other people, because the lukewarm Catholic can look at the person who's not Catholic or who's maybe not even baptized, that's been raised in these really, really rough and difficult situations, and say, oh, look at them. Like, they don't even go to church. At least I go to church every Sunday. I don't do anything else. I don't actually practice my faith or believe any of this stuff, but I go to mass every Sunday, so I'm better than them. And then that person can look at this person and say, wow, I'm not good enough. I'm not as good as them. Look how faithful they are. They go to church every single weekend. I can't believe that, and all these things, and get discouraged. And so this is the same thing that we do. We either compare ourselves unfairly in either direction. This is why comparing yourself to you is the most one-to-one best comparison that you can make. And it's going to give you the most reasonable and accurate idea of where you're actually at, how you're actually progressing, if you are progressing at all. This comes from another book called The Gap and the Gain. I'm reading a book right now called 10x is easier than 2x. The authors of the book also wrote this other book called The Gap and the Gain, and they describe this where you're either living in the gap or you're living in the gain. What they mean by that is the gap is basically looking at the distance between you and your ideal. And so in Seeking Excellence, I'm all about promoting ideals. And so I talk about how my ideal, maybe my 10 out of 10 in my spiritual life, or in my relationship, or my physical fitness, or my personal finances, might look a certain way, but there's a distance between me and that 10. It's impossible essentially to be a 10 in every single category, because you're always going to be kind of ebbing and flowing and giving a little bit of extra attention or treatment to one area or another. I work in sales, and so at the end of the month, work needs a little bit more priority. There might be other slower times and seasons throughout the year or of the month where maybe I am able to go to the gym another time during the week, or I'm able to read read a little bit more. I'm able to do other things and prioritize other areas of my life. There's going to be times when I'm on paternity leave where my family gets really emphasized and it's important, and I'm very, very present at home, and I'm active and able to do everything with them all the time. And then there's going to be other times again where I have to work overtime. I have to work extra to be able to provide for our family as we live on one income. And so there's going to be balances and ebbs and flows and seasons and different things. So if you're constantly comparing yourself to all the ideals across all 6 pillars of excellence, you're going to get discouraged because you're going to say, wow, I'm not the husband I should be. I'm not the father I should be. I'm not making the money I should be making. I'm not budgeting and investing the money I should be making the way that I should be doing it. I'm not my 10 physical fitness wise. I'm not at a 10 spiritually. And you just start to get discouraged because you're showing yourself across all of these ways and looking at the gap in between you and the ideal. This is where so many people get discouraged when it comes to ideals, and why so much of society has just totally abandoned them and doesn't like them. What the ideal is meant to do, and this is what they highlight in the book, is it's meant to actually give you a direction that you should go in. So it's more of a guidepost. It's more of a sign. It's more of that horizon at the end that helps you to know that you're heading west, that helps you to know you're heading in the right direction by looking at the ideal and moving closer and closer towards it. But the best way to live is to compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who somebody else is today. And this is what they call looking at your gain. You're actually going to look at where you were a year ago in all of these measurable categories and say, okay, am I actually improving along these lines? Is my marriage stronger than it was a year ago? Is my physical health in a better place than it was a year ago? Is my personal financial situation in a better place than it was a year ago? And the answer to that is not always going to be yes. There's going to be times I tore my Achilles about 4 years ago, and there was a time after that where it was a hard no. Was my physical shape better than it was a year ago? But you can give yourself some grace. You can give yourself context to different circumstances and say, okay, now I can make a plan for this next year. And I definitely want to be able to say next year, I'm in a better place physically or financially. Say you have a huge storm that happens financially. There's a big thing that happens where you have to replace your roof, or your car dies on you, or there's something that happens that kind of wrecks your financial plan for 2025. That's okay. Maybe next year you're going to be a little bit behind. But again, you can zoom out as far as you need to say, well, I'm definitely in a better place financially than I was a decade ago. I know that for sure. I'm better than I was 5 years ago. Am I better than I was 6 months ago? Am I better than I was a month ago? Have I gotten back to budgeting or investing or tithing the way that I know that I should be? This allows you to see the gain that you've made over the last 6 months, year, 10 years, whatever the amount of time is that you need to look at, and to be realistic with yourself in ways that you can say over the last 5 years, I've let myself go physically. I've actually been worse in my relationships. I've actually fallen backwards. That at least gives you those areas that you can highlight to say, this is where I need to focus. This is where I need to put extra energy, extra attention, extra effort in order to make myself proud a year, 5 years, 10 years, 25 years from now, to be able to look back in my life and say, wow, I really made a difference. And I'm really glad that I invested into this area of my life. So I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear in the comments, what areas of your life do you feel like you've had the most gain? And where do you feel like you need to invest more time, energy, and effort in order to see the biggest gain in the next year or 5 years of your life? If you want to talk about this more one-on-one, you can always shoot me a message, leave a comment here on YouTube, or message me on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, or join us on Locals at seekingexcellence.locals.com, where you can become a free member, or you can join as a subscriber for as little as $10 per month and get access to all of our content on there. Hope to see you over there. Thanks for listening to this video. If you enjoyed this, give us a like, subscribe to the channel, send this to somebody you know who needs this, who needs to hear this encouragement today, to not compare themselves endlessly to other people, to live in that discouragement, apathy, and darkness that produces, but rather to live a life of optimism, of hope, and of true confidence that comes from seeing the gain and the progress you've made over the years. God bless you, and it's time for you to go out there and be your best. I'll see you next time.